Hello, Phil. How's things, mate? You good?
Hi, Jason. Yeah, I'm great. Thanks. Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, you too, mate. You too. It's been a while, and we I've seen you plenty of times over the years. So thank you very very much for joining me and being what I'm glad to say is the first of our podcasts which is focused solely on software. So Phil, as you know, you and I have known each other many years, working together at Xerox historically, and then probably over the last decade or so. In partnership when I've had opportunities with your product XMPie, and when I say your product, it's because whenever I think of XMPie, it's quite simply I think of yourself. So, and as much as I'm aware of XMPie as a product and a software suite, I'm sure that there will be, and I'm sure there's lots of the viewers and listeners that will also be aware, but there may be some that aren't. So, would I be able to just ask you to give a quick introduction to yourself and XMPie, please, mate?
Of course, yeah, and thanks for the invite as well. So, yeah, so as you say, I mean, I've been in and around the print industry for over 30 years now. Initially working for Xerox, and then about 10 years ago, moved to XMPie, which is a software company specializing in software solutions that include print as part of the mix, but actually allow printers and service providers to actually go on over and above print and start offering other services. So some examples really are variable data printing, which is clearly what we're going to talk about in this session. But we also play in the web to print space and in the omni-channel marketing communication space as well.
Okay, brilliant.
In terms of my role, I'm business development channel manager at XMPie, responsible for the UK, Ireland, and the Middle East. So, as you say, although we've got a team of people, I tend to sort of be the initial point of contact.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks very much for that, then, Phil. As we know, with everything, we're living in a world which is continuously changing and and evolving, and the print industry is kind of no different. My very first introduction to XMPie, and you mentioned the fact that obviously the variable data and personalization is the bit we're going to touch on today. And I think back to my very first introduction, which perhaps some of the viewers and listeners may have received a calendar back in the day, which was the application that I remember clearly. So during the summer months, I think your name was written in tennis balls, and then in winter it was maybe formed in snow and all that sort of stuff. And it's one of those things that I love that particular sample and application. It's one of those things that I get excited by print, as I'm sure that you do, and lots of these viewers will as well. But it was one of those things that you really wanted to take home and show people this is what we do, and sort of adding value into clients. And in terms of personalization, we see it all the time now, and people are becoming very clever with the way that they're marketing. As you mentioned before, there's several aspects that form the XMPie suite of solutions, but we are going to focus on the on personalization and variable data. And so to kind of kick things off then, really, mate, would you mind just giving us more of a description of what variable data printing is, and what commercial printers do to use that to increase their profitability?
Yeah, it's a fairly good point that you raised there, because there's so much jargon that we use that it's, for me, variable data printing just seems like a second nature. But actually, VDP, variable data printer, it's not necessarily that descriptive for anybody that doesn't know it. And I think probably a better way of describing it is data-driven print. So it's a way of being able to use data, and don't be scared by that. It can be a simple list or spreadsheet, or it can be a database that actually allows you to then create different versions or different content within each individual print. So if it's personalized, as you mentioned with calendars, you can put somebody's name either just as print, or in a creative way, as you mentioned, like writing the name on tennis balls or in the sky, in the clouds, or something like that. Where XMPie sort of is really quite unique in that space is that we integrate into the Adobe Creative Cloud environment. So rather than try and create our own tools that give companies the ability to do personalized print, we just integrate into the software, that pretty much the de facto software for creatives that will build content, and we just extend that and allow full control over personalization, and actually beyond personalization and into relevancy and control of the content within the page or pages as well.
Yeah, brilliant. And you kind of, I guess what I was going to ask was in terms of specifics to businesses and marketers, any sort of key benefits? I know you've touched me there, but kind of a bit more specific in terms of what that actually does for these companies and marketers.
Of course, yes. I mean, I suppose, ultimately, the more personalized and relevant you make print, then the more likely somebody is to interact with it. So it plays well in the marketing space. Indirect mail, for example, is a big use, and also in the transactional promotional space as well, where maybe it's a standard communication, but you want to be able to upsell or cross sell into other environments. And it's proven there's loads of market research that's out there that shows that the more tailored it is, then the higher the response rates are likely to be, the bigger the call to action, and obviously that drives revenue. So from a marketing perspective, personalizing and adding relevant content does drive, it generates better responses, better value. But also, to look at it from a slightly different perspective, there's a lot of people that are printing that version, so they make different versions of things.
Yep.
And even in today's world, you find a lot of those people are still manually making different versions. So you can take that data driven approach, and rather than just create personalized content or relevant content, you can actually use it to drive content. So you've got different versions of different for example, maybe a brochure that is for different resellers of a brand. So you've got a standard brochure, but you actually want to be able to maybe include in that a different logo or location information, but actually it's just one of a number of versions. Rather than manually do that, you can just drive that from a very simple Excel spreadsheet. Another example in retail is things like shelf edge tickets or point of sale, banners and things like that. Again, in the sort of small retailers, you find that that's quite a manual process. So somebody sitting there designing each individual one, we can just take that and completely automate that. So in the automation space, where it's about saving money, whereas in the sort of personalized relevant content, it's about actually creating more revenues.
Yep. Yeah. So, and again, I think if we think and maybe look even bigger, that you can go to the levels of personalizing the languages that are used and can have different translations. So globally, you can get the same message across to people that perhaps in different regions and using different first languages.
Yeah, exactly, and that's one of the great things that using the Adobe Creative Cloud environment, anybody that uses Adobe InDesign, for example, we support every language that Adobe supports, whether it be English and European languages going left to right, but even languages that go right to left, like Arabic, etc. And not only do we change the content in the sense of text and imagery, but you can use some simple logic and rules to actually turn on different elements, maybe different layers or different pages, different. Basically, each individual version can be completely different from the last, but it's the data and the logic that's driving those changes.
Yeah. So, and you've kind of touched on this briefly, but in terms of say using variable data printing compared to static printing, would you say that there's certain projects which would be more suitable for VDP?
Yes, absolutely. And it tends to be, big uses would be clearly anything that's personalized that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do easily in a traditional sense. It used to be a two-step process. You would maybe print something in litho and then inkjet over the top, just a name and address. Whereas now, by actually using the digital process, yes, of course you can put the name and address on, but because every page is literally an original, you can actually start to change the actual content on the page so it becomes more relevant to each individual. And there's not any additional cost really in doing that, because with digital, and it's again something we take for granted, every copy is actually an original. So by adding differences in each copy doesn't cost a printer any more to do. It's just using the intelligence of the data to drive different versions or different relevant content.
Yeah, very, 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 very powerful. We mentioned at the very start, Phil, that obviously the world's changing. It's continuously changing. Things are evolving. I guess nobody could have predicted what was going to happen globally a few years ago. And I'm going to mention the word because it has had an impact on everyone's everyday life. But in terms of what the effect has been to print and what you're seeing in print with what you do, what's the sort of the impact that COVID has had, and how has this kind of led to people having to look at different ways to communicate with their clients?
Well, it's again, that for us, we were in I suppose, a slightly unusual position, because our software helps people drive content, not just in print. And I know we're talking about print now, but if I may, just to sort of expand slightly, since COVID, several of my customers in the print industry have come and actually said that if it wasn't for our software, they probably wouldn't be in business now. And that's not just in the personalized or variable data printing space, that's sort of in the web to print space, and also with the omni-channel communications, being able to communicate in email or in other channels as well as print, meant that that was a real shift of focus for people, and being able to actually still send communications out in different ways. So we saw, we were actually, we saw a big uptake in use of our software during the pandemic. In terms of what it's done specifically for print, I think now what we're definitely seeing a real focus on direct mail. But whereas the days of mass direct mail that was just kind of, literally sort of that came through the letterbox that you looked at and potentially just threw it straight in the bin because it's direct mail. What we're seeing now is the ability to make it more relevant and more targeted, but also a focus on different substrates as well. So not just the really lightweight stuff, but something that's a little bit more tactile or actually wants you to interact with it. And the way I always describe it really is that, and it's probably terrible I'm saying it, but some of that really low end direct mail that we all used to receive every day, I used to go, and literally you'd look at it and stick it in the recycling. The thing with direct mail though is that no matter how many other channels are out there that are being used for marketing, direct mail, you pick it up and you've got that opportunity between picking it up and deciding on whether you're going to put it in the recycling or not. It's selling to you. You've got, what's the call to action? And some of them are intriguing. And so you actually want to open it. And I think that's the important thing. It's about using the information that you've got on people to actually make them actually want to interact and to do something and to open it and engage. And of course, another thing that variable data printing can do is drive things like barcoding, which is pretty obvious in the mailing space to do mailing barcodes and the like, and retail for retail barcodes, but also things like QR codes, which now, because of the pandemic, everybody, even my mum knows how to interact with a QR code. So what that has done is provided another value add for print, which is to use it as an onboarding tool to go from that piece of physical print easily into some sort of an online environment or experience where you can capture consent then to start communicating in different channels as well. So that's just showing really the value of linking print into the digital space.
Yeah, and I think that word there, value, is crucial, isn't it? Phil, can I just ask you, how has ChatGPT, and if you could let people know who maybe haven't been introduced to ChatGPT, how that's created more sort of solutions and new solutions for XMPie?
Yeah, so in the last probably the last 12 months, the acceleration in AI and AI in the news as well, the coverage, it's phenomenal, exponential. But we see it as really becoming an opportunity for people in different ways. I'll start by just explaining. You made reference to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is just one of a number of AI tools or artificial intelligence tools, and they're generative tools. So to put it into perspective in the variable data printing space, usually when you send out content, and it's true for other channels as well as print, you have data that drives content, so you need some form of logic that says, if this person's interested in, I don't know, washing machines, I want to bring in imagery that's relevant to either washing machines or white goods. And so you have a kind of finite number of permutations that you can use, and we can obviously take it to whatever level you need in terms of the relevancy, but you're still reliant on what assets you've got that are being referenced from the data. What artificial intelligence allows you to do is to say, right, okay, so this person is asking for information on a particular type of product, or a little bit more detail maybe, and I don't have anything for that. So now you have the ability to go out to a chat GPT type tool and say, right, I need some content, or I need some information that I can use as essentially extra data or assets within that piece of print. So it allows you to go get stuff that you don't have. And in the future, you can imagine, let's just use an example, estate agency. We've got lots of users that do various different content within that space. Imagine that you're trying to sell a house or promote a property in a particular area. You might actually want to target different people that would be interested. It might be appropriate to, I don't know, a single professional or a family, but your messaging might be different. So you've got the ability to say, right, this is the property, this is where it is. I want you to sell this as a property to somebody that meets this criteria, and then ChatGPT or any of the tools that are similar to it can give you content that then allows you to actually not just provide a standard run-of-the-mill brochure, but something that's really selling the benefits to somebody that's meaningful to them and who they are and their circumstances.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to kind of follow on from that, and I know that I've got friends of mine that have got their own estate agencies, and to give a real sort of crude example of that, you would be somebody who perhaps had a disability, might be wheelchair bound. You wouldn't be advertising a property that may be an apartment which is on a top floor, whatever. You're specifically looking at something which is bungalows, ground floor access, and ramps, etc. From a personal point of view, some of the data and the things that are marketed to me, for example, I can't remember the last time anyone might have marketed perhaps a size 30 waist pair of trousers. I think I'm well beyond that, and people so, but it's about intelligent use of data, isn't it, mate? And that's that's so. In terms of somebody perhaps who isn't aware, can you give an example? I know it's difficult based on sort of confidentiality, etc. But have you got an example? Could you give us an insight perhaps to a company that people may recognise and what they're doing and who are using XMPy?
Yeah, so I'll sort of reference some of the case studies and customer testimonials that we've done, and around the world we've got literally 7,000-8,000 customers that use our software. I want to say customers, they're companies that are obviously then selling their services to many other companies. But in the UK, we've still got hundreds of customers, companies that use our software. Some well-known names like Brewdog, for example. Not a printer, but you can actually order personalized cans of beer in a lovely presentation pack, and they're using our software behind the scenes to actually generate the personalization through their e-commerce platform. So it's still variable data printing, and they're actually doing it for labeling. We've got customers ranging from very small printing companies right the way through to some larger ones. And so we've got many case studies at the xmpy.com website. If you go to the resources tab, you can actually access not just case studies, but webinar recordings. And just to give you some examples, where we've got companies like Latcham, which is a big direct mail house in Bristol, Premier Communications. We've got Claremont, who did a great testimonial for us from up in Bradford, and not only just commercial printers, but also, for example, we've got University of York that use our software internally as well, and many companies we can't talk about, such as local councils and government agencies and stuff like that. So you get the feel for anything really that requires dynamic content that's driven from data. Our software can fit, and it can drive the pretty mundane standard types of print right the way through to the more creative marketing type, marketing led communications as well.
Yeah, man, and thanks. And you mentioned the website there. Just to add at the end of the podcast, we will be putting contact details and websites, etc., for people to explore and understand a little bit more. You mentioned when we were talking just then as well around the BrewDog and what they're doing and personalisation and sort of labelling, etc. I think one of the biggest campaigns that we'd have seen over the last few years was that share a whatever drink with so and so, which had various different names, etc., on it. Other soft drink brands are obviously available as well. But you know, and I wanted to just kind of lead from that on to the fact, you know, kind of what does it do in terms of engagement and response rates by using this sort of software?
Well, the more personalized and relevant you make it, the more people interact. Now, typically, if you go back to the old days where direct mail, you still see some of it, but direct mail, as an example, was just basically a generic through your letterbox. Yeah. People used to send it out in the huge, great volume, you know, mass volume. And the reason they did that was because it was a pretty much guaranteed less than 1% response. So the more you send out, you know that roughly under 1% you'll get a response. So you send as many out as you can to try and get a return. But there was no real intelligence in that because everybody gets the same and it's a tiny, tiny response rate. What you find is if you start adding people's names in, and again with GDPR, which is obviously now law, we have to be a little bit careful about that. But you know, you can still use somebody's first name as an example, because that doesn't necessarily make it specific to them. So you can be creative, but the more personalized and relevant you make it, the more likely you are to see response rates. And just to put it into perspective, you know, you might see, and again, it's as good as the design or the campaign, you might see 4, 5, 10%, for example. And when you get into the sort of double digits, I mean, that is pretty significant. I'm going to deviate a little bit from just personalized print, but then when you start talking about integrating not just print, but blending it with a campaign that you've got email as well and maybe some personalized web content. I can give you examples of campaigns that we've done where we enable personalized video, which is another channel that we can personalize, and you see that in conjunction with emails and print, you see response rates or call to actions, click-throughs and things of, you know, like 45-50%. And we've got some case studies online that you can go to and that will actually share some of those. Clearly, you know, different campaigns give different results, but the more that you can make it relevant, then the more likely somebody is going to be engaged and interact with it. But, you know, significantly big jumps from the old days of just send out the same rubbish to everybody and hope that you'll get a tiny proportion that will actually respond.
Yeah, and relevance is key there. So I think back to one of my clients, and actually back to my days when I was applying for university many years ago, and it was really quite intriguing that actually you can add value by printing less. And some of the print service providers that I've worked with were like, well, what do you mean? Well, you know, when I was applying for universities, you get prospectus, which is sent through, which is like literally that size. It's got everything, all encompassing. Whereas actually the relevance and the pages within that document that are relevant to me as the recipient or the applicant are probably only half a dozen, maybe 12, maybe 18, whatever. But you can now go to the degree whereby you personalize that prospectus. You're adding value. I get one which turns up, which is, you know, my interest would have been sport back then, perhaps more socializing these days. But you can do that, and any subjects that you can be clever in the background. So say they've picked one particular subject, you can have maybe 6 or 7 that relate into that one that they may be interested in that also get sent out. So I mean that was something that I do remember clearly from one of my clients.
Yeah. And I mean, I know, in fact, it was about 1998, 1999. I remember showing a number of universities a little demo we put together, which was personalized prospectuses. If you like, it was probably the very first or one of the very first web to print applications where you ask somebody what they're interested in, and then 20 seconds later, out the end of a printer comes a signature booklet that's stitched, that's completely personalized, but also relevant to what it is that they're interested in, the subjects, maybe the interests as well that you've got. And it's definitely less is more, because there was this, I think people were, at the time, people were scared because they know that if they send out something that was this thick, It's got everything in, so there's no question that they're missing something. And to go from something like that and then provide something that's a lot thinner was really quite worrying, because you don't want to lose people because you're not providing the information. And then that really goes back to the data. And we've seen that if you know what you're doing, you can actually make fewer but more relevant, more targeted content work and far exceed what you get in terms of the standard stuff that you've got to literally flip through. But of course, again, we've seen a mix now, because printed prospectuses is still a big application that's used in the UK and around the world. You've seen a sort of a shift from just print to PDF, and in some cases it's now going to sort of almost an online experience. However, what is again, what is quite interesting is that if you're sending it certainly to an undergraduate, you want to send something that they can sit with their parents and go through, and print is absolutely the thing to do there even today. So why wouldn't you create something that's personalized and relevant that they can do that with, but you've still got within that same print environment the opportunity to put simple QR codes that allow you to interact with something that takes it and extends it beyond that. So back to this less is more. You can provide something that's far more targeted, that's a lot less cost to produce in terms of not just the printing but the mailing of it. But then you've got this as basically an opportunity then to go wherever you need to bring in all of that additional information that's required.
Yeah, excellent. Just something suddenly dawned on me there, Phil, as we're talking, and hopefully anyone who's watching or listening to this isn't having any problem with their audio, because you and I talking about less is more and going from this to this and like that, then they're probably we won't.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Anyway, digress a little bit. In terms of sort of any advice that you would give to a business that's looking to get into variable data printing for the first time, perhaps have never been on board until now, what would you advise?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is don't be scared by it, because as we started off, I think your first question was along the lines of what does it mean? And variable data printing, if you think about it, it doesn't mean a lot unless you know what it is. So I would say don't be frightened by it. Data isn't scary, and it doesn't have to be complicated databases. It can literally be just a simple spreadsheet with even just a list of names or a list of details. So that's the first thing. So, from a data perspective, you don't need to have really strong data skills. You just need maybe to be able to use a spreadsheet or Microsoft Excel. For us, that if you're doing design anyway, so if you've got a pre-press department or you've got a designer that you work with, if they're using Adobe InDesign, for example, then really it's very, very easy for them to extend with the software and to actually start using it with data to drive personalization very, very efficiently and obviously diversify into personalized print. So I would say you don't need really complicated skills. You also don't need a huge budget, because if you're starting off, the great thing about the XMPy software is that it's completely modular and scalable. So we offer a couple of different versions of our variable data printing desktop software that works with a PC and a Macintosh, integrates into Adobe InDesign. We've got one of those versions that also supports Photoshop and Illustrator. So back to your reference earlier about those calendars with the your name in the clouds and the like, you can do that again from a spreadsheet, create some printed content that can include imagery that's also personalized as part of that print, and that starts at our desktop level. But of course, we recognize that as people become successful or people are doing bigger volume applications, we also offer a range of server-based applications as well. Which are there to give you much more throughput, much more data processing capabilities. But of course, at that point, you also have available the opportunity to move into other areas such as web to print and omni-channel communications and as well. So it kind of opens up wherever you need to go, but starting wherever there's a business need.
Yep. Yeah, excellent thing, and that's really crucial. We hadn't mentioned it before, that it is very much modular and scalable, so you can it can grow with the business. On some of the other podcasts and things that we've done, there've been people we've been trying to ask the question, and people have been quite coy about what might be coming. But can you give any sort of advice on what may be coming downstream? Any sort of growth applications? Any markets that are or emerging trends that you can give the viewers a bit of an insight to?
Yeah, well, I suppose we, as a software company, we're constantly adding new features, new capabilities, and we've done that over the years. And that can be simple, probably quite boring things like every time somebody brings out Royal Mail, for example, bring out a new version of their mailing barcode, then we obviously make sure we've got support for that. But also we're always working to maximize efficiency, because what I didn't say at the start was that there are lots of variable data printing solutions that allow you to create different versions, different personalized copies. But what they tend to do is they do it in an inefficient way by creating lots and lots of pages on the application on the PC or the Macintosh. What we do is our output module, our printing module, the variable data printing bit, is where our intelligence sits, and we work very closely with Adobe. And we ensure that we can get the maximum, the quickest generation of a personalized or dynamic PDF file from data. But that's only half the story. And some people get hung up about that because what we actually do is we make it efficient so that it's a small size. So we don't put the same image in every single time that we need it, because we know that if we've got 1,000 or 10,000 or 1,000,000 people, some of those images might be reused. So we actually put a lot of focus on the intelligence of how we create the print file, and that means that when you process it, it processes a lot quicker on modern printers as well. So it is really a truly data through to a physical print rather than how quick can we generate a PDF file. And for us, it's the bigger picture. So in terms of development, we've just literally in the process of launching a version that includes a PDF VT version 3, which again sounds a bit geeky and stuff. But PDF files, there are lots of different types of PDF files. By the very nature of PDF, it's a portable document format. It's designed to be online, to be printed, to be looked at on your phone. Yeah. It's not necessarily something that's going to be helpful when you want to print it without a job ticket that goes with it to say, how do I want to print this? How do I know that the first person in this PDF file has 2 pages and the second has got 5 pages? So what PDF VT does is it actually creates almost like a job ticket inside the PDF, so that you know that the first so many pages belong to one record or one person, the next so many belong to the next. And then in conjunction with a printer, it can say, okay, well, I can make each one of those into a signature booklet, even though they've all got different numbers of pages. Yeah. And it also includes inside the file some metadata as well. Again, getting a little bit techie, but what that means is if you need to index or archive that, you've got information inside the PDF that allows you to easily search it and retrieve it in the future as well. So we're supporting this new version of PDF VT3. And actually, I think I'm right in saying at this stage, it's before even printing RIPs on printers have the capability to even use it. So it's staying ahead of the curve. In terms of applications, though, I would say labels and packaging is an interesting market. I've already mentioned BrewDog, but we are starting to see that space really evolve. And it's sad to say that some applications in terms of printed applications are in decline, but if you look in labels and packaging, that's something that still represents the brand, and you're not really going to take that away, because that's the label that tells you what's inside, or it's the package that contains something that has to be there by law because it gives you ingredients or certain information. So there's an opportunity there to actually add more to that and make it more maybe versioned or tailored or actually personalized in some cases too.
Excellent. Thank you very much, mate. And I think that brings us on, because obviously PDF VT is something that I haven't seen or been introduced to as yet. Brings us very nicely onto what I would say is kind of the conclusion of this podcast. But we mentioned earlier the websites and contact details will be added at the end. You and I, we've already had conversations. We're going to be looking to do something in the early part of next year as well, which a lot of the viewers and listeners will be invited to. If anyone wants something more bespoke to them, we'd be more than happy. I know that you've always been more than happy to set up those sort of webinars, go out to meet people face to face, which is something we're able to do again now, which is kind of 2 years ago perhaps seemed a long way from where we might be now. But listen, that's been really great, Phil. If there's anything else you want to add at all, mate? You quite happy?
I mean, I thank you for the opportunity to come along and talk to people about what XMPI can do. And you know, I would recommend go and take a look. Don't just take my word for it. Go have a look at some of the case studies and testimonials of our customers to see what it's done for their businesses. And you know, the modular thing that we touched on towards the end, that's a key thing, because there's businesses that have, you know, in the UK and around the world that have literally used XMPI as a way of growing and diversifying and doing new things, driving new print volume, but also offering new services as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you very, very much, Phil. Really do appreciate your insight, your time, your knowledge. Obviously, is crucial. And thanks again, and we'll speak soon, no doubt.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers,
Nice
Phil.
to see you. Bye.